Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1948's crime thriller Brighton Rock, starring Richard Attenborough, Hermione Baddeley and William Hartnell. Now, this was directed by John Boulting and was based on the novel by Graham Greene, and it's a moody and atmospheric British noir thriller set against the backdrop of the seaside resort town of Brighton. Now, it is the story of a sadistic young gangster named Pinkie Brown, played here by Richard Attenborough, who works for a protection racket in the coastal town, who, after a series of events including murder, turf warfare and doomed romance, finds himself getting a taste of his own unsavoury medicine. Now, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that this may possibly be the best British noir movie ever made. If not, it certainly sits up there and has one of the most punch-you-in-the-heart endings of its time. Let's take a look.
All right, Spicy. Goodbye.
So it's quite a famous bit of trivia that in the 1940s, when Brighton Rock was first released, the local tourist bureau was so nervous that this less than glamorous look at the town would tarnish its good name and scare off tourists. Something that ultimately led to the film opening with a crawl informing the audience that this kind of thing was all in the past and that Brighton is now a very safe and happy tourist destination. Thank you very much. Anyway, here we have a movie that delves into themes of local corruption, religious guilt, and shows us that youths terrorising nice little towns isn't really a recent affliction. Our central character here is an unlikable little scumbag with little to no redeeming features, and one of the most fascinating things about the film is that the audience is asked to be almost sympathetic to a baby-faced maniac. And so at the heart of this tale is Pinkie Brown, a young gangster played with chilling intensity by Richard Attenborough in one of his earliest screen roles. Pinkie's a rising star in the criminal underworld of Brighton. And I absolutely love Attenborough's performance here, offering an unsettling portrayal of a young man who's both driven by fear and Catholic guilt, but also consumed by his own evil impulses. So Brighton Rock kicks off with the brutal and calculated murder of a journalist, Fred Hale, played by Alan Wheatley. Said journalist apparently was to blame for the death of one of Pinkie's gang, and Hale's death, however, sets off a chain of events that leads to Pinkie becoming embroiled in a deadly game of cat and mouse and, along the way, dragging a poor waitress into the mix with him. The narrative here takes an interesting turn when Pinkie meets the young and naive Rose, played by Carol Marsh. She's a kind-hearted waitress who becomes romantically involved with him, unaware of his criminal activities. And their relationship, which initially seems doomed from the start, grows increasingly complex as Pinkie manipulates Rose into complicity with his dark schemes. You see, as he's frightened about being uncovered, he decides to have a crooked lawyer fix it so that the poor underage girl can be legally married to him, so she can no longer be used as a witness against him. This whole twisted psychological manipulation that Pinkie has over poor Rose is one of the film's most chilling aspects, even amongst the murder and razor blade battles. Also, I have to mention Hermione Baddeley as the loudmouth beer-loving singer Ida Arnold. It's her character really who gets wind of some of this and not only goes to the police asking them to investigate this reporter's death, but also shows concern for Rose getting in too deep with the thuggish Pinkie. So Graham Greene's original novel, which was published in 1938, contains themes of Catholicism, sin, redemption and the nature of evil, and I think these religious undertones are translated into this film without them being too on the nose. But they do give Attenborough's Pinkie an internal struggle, so that he has to wrestle between his desire for power and his fear of eternal damnation. Now, being a fan of classic British cinema, I do enjoy the setting of Brighton here more than the tourist board did anyway. Here it's all seedy arcades, bustling piers, and there is a good balance between bright sunlit boardwalks and the darker, more sinister corners of the town that Pinkie and his gang inhabit. This contrast heightens that sense of duality in the film, making the town not just a setting, but a character in its own right. Now, the more I watch Brighton Rock, the more I appreciate cinematographer Harry Waxman's ability to capture the contrasts between this light and dark. His use of shadows is effective in scenes featuring Pinkie, his darker side, visually mirrored by the shadows that follow him wherever he goes. So the film was directed by British filmmaker John Boulting, who made a good few movies, but this is by far, for me, his greatest achievement. Boulting pulls off some striking shots and scenes, and like I mentioned in the intro, genuinely fashions one of the great film noirs, one that can go toe-to-toe with anything from Hollywood. Now, of course, I'll always champion British cinema, and here what I love is this fusion of dark and dangerous film noir with post-war British socialism, or kitchen sink drama, if you like. Although I have to note that the film is set in 1935, Brighton Rock has a gritty, down-to-earth portrayal of Brighton and its underworld, a world of seaside cafes, smoky pubs and run-down boarding houses, perfect locations for these part-time hoodlums to inhabit. And that's another interesting element, I think. We have an Italian gangster on the scene also in the shape of Charles Goldner's Corleone, not to be mistaken with the Corleone family of the Godfather series, but here Corleone and his crew represent this new threat of organised crime, both to the inhabitants of Brighton, but also to Pinkie and his crew, who are two-bit nobodies in comparison. So the rest of the supporting cast in Brighton Rock is also great. A range of well-known British character actors such as William Hartnell and Frank Finlay. They all add to the authenticity and give a depth to the story. I especially like Hartnell here as the corrupt and ruthless gangster Darrow, both an ally and a rival to Pinkie throughout the film. Hartnell, of course, would be a Doctor Who for a decade between 63 and 73, but was a prolific character actor during the 40s and 50s. Now, of course, a generation used to seeing Sir Richard Attenborough as Jurassic Park's lovable John Hammond or Miracle on 34th Street Santa Claus may be quite shocked to see him as razor blade wielding teenage gangster here. He was in a few crime dramas throughout the 40s, little scene films like London Belongs to Me and Dancing with Crime. But I feel like Brighton Rock, though, even despite his illustrious career in acting and directing, is one of his finest hours. So yeah, it's nearly 80 years old now, this movie, and remains a quite chilling, atmospheric and morally complex film that still holds up. Its 2010 remake, although a very solid adaptation in its own right, can't really hope to compete with it. Attenborough's standout performance as Pinkie Brown, Boulting's taut direction and the dark but realistic subject matter have given the film a pretty lasting impact as one of cinema's great film noir thrillers. Its ending, although different from Greene's book, is one of the finest moments of despair in film history. Go check it out.
If the worst happens, we gotta act quick. You don't want to see me hang, do you?
No!